excel at, and that's denial. And of course, the biggest denial is that any of us are going to retire or that we're going to die. And we always think there's going to be an exception to that rule made in our case. I think that's very true. But before that final curtain comes, there's something called retirement. And now I know there's a lot of sensible people who planned for that day since they were 21. I'm not one of those. And actually, I don't know many people. I'm not sure I have any friends who started planning at 21. But coming along to save us is author Miriam Goodman, who's written Reinventing Retirement, 389 bright ideas about family, friends, health, and what to do and where to live. Would you please welcome Miriam Goodman? Welcome, Miriam. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
All right. I'm getting organized. I forgot to pick up the book. And of course, I never did practice how to sit in the stool. So I'm practicing on you and Katie, okay? Anyway, I couldn't help but notice, but the headings of each little section in your books, first of all, why 389?
It just happened that way. Someone went through and counted them and decided those were all the good ideas about retirement.
So you didn't do 390 and cut one out? No, okay. Wonderful. Anyway, I noticed that each little section in your book, it's divided into chapters and little sections, and there's little bits of advice and what to do. But I couldn't help but notice that most of them are song titles, and they're song titles from the 60s mainly. So you're appealing to the boomers, who are, of course, the ones who are retiring, and especially the Beatles. And I think I knew every song on every chapter except Come and Go With Me. What's that one?
It could be that it's Rolling Stones if it's not Beatles, but I went through all their songs and tried to find the ones that would work.
That were appropriate, yeah. Well, you know how to tug at us boomers' heartstrings with those sort of things. And in fact, I introduced you about the denial. You actually dedicate the book to Peter Pan. So,
well, that's right, because Peter Pan never grew up and never had to think about retirement.
And there hasn't always been retirement, right? It's quite a new thing, really, in the force of humankind.
It is rather new. I mean, Thomas Paine thought that the government should give people at age 50 money to retire, but that never happened. Yeah. So he also thought they should give them to children when they were born, too, and that didn't happen either. But yes, it wasn't really until the Depression that they decided that people who worked deserved something for after they stopped working.
Also, I guess people were starting to live longer. I suppose in earlier days, people didn't make 65 that often, did they?
No, they didn't. And actually, it hasn't been all that long that people had so many years after retirement. Now, people could retire at 65 and have 20, 25, 30 years left.
Well, I noticed it, actually in that section of your book, you say retired people choose to spend their next 20, 30, or 40 years. 40 years, wow, it'd make me 101. You're very optimistic.
Well, they keep telling us the age limit keeps going longer and longer. And in fact, there's almost a competition. People say, well, I'm 90. Well, gee, I'm 93, so.
I've always thought that a strange thing in old people, I have to admit, who feel compelled to tell people their age. But I desperately hope I don't get to that stage. Well, now, I know people don't like to think about retiring, but I don't know, I'm not averse to it. When I look in my calendar now and I see 3 or 4 days in a row with nothing in it, I'm sort of pretty ecstatic and want to plan some woodworking things. Is that a general feeling, or do you think that people these days don't want to retire?
They don't want to retire because they really haven't made plans for what they're going to do. And someone like you, I was at a party last night with a lot of musicians, and all of them said, well, who worries about retirement when you have a piano in the house? Yeah. So they have something they love to do, but there's so many people who don't know what it is they love to do or gave it up a long time ago and don't know how to start it again. And even in music, every teenage boy and a lot of teenage girls who grew up in the 60s wanted to be in a rock band. Right. And they had to, make a living instead. Well, it's not too late. Yeah. When you retire, call all those old friends, get your guitar out of hock, and go try again.
Just don't live next door to me. Anyway. But you have parts in the book here set up as the challenge and the solution. One of the first challenges is when to retire. Are there any rules?
I guess the rule really is when you're ready, and you have to figure out when you're ready and what you're willing to give up. Because when you give up work, full-time work, you're giving up structure, you're giving up purpose, and you're giving up a community. Mm-hmm. And those things need to be replicated in your life after retirement, or you're going to be at sea.
Yeah. I noticed that at one point you say 85 could be the new 65. But actually, I like the one I heard recently where somebody told me, 60 is the new 59. And I like that. Our dear friends here, Asa and Tom, are getting married later on in the program. And I don't know if they're retired or not, but retirement can be a stress on marriage, can't it?
It absolutely can be a stress on marriage. And I think the most important thing is that people don't talk about how they feel about retirement before it happens. So a man might retire and come home and say to his wife, well, I retired. And she'd say, well, don't you think we should have talked about this? Yeah. Or even when they go to a financial planner, the man will say, oh, well, we agree on what we want to do. And she said, but we haven't talked about this. What are we going to do? And for women especially, they have always been multitaskers, right. Women of this generation anyway, and so working was one of the things they did besides taking care of the children, besides taking care of the husband and the house and the friends and the in-laws and everybody else, whereas men worked. Right. And so all of a sudden the man's home and he expects her to be available 24 hours a day. And she says, I have a life. I have other things I want to do. And it is very, very stressful. And actually the number of marriages ending for people over 55 is the highest rate in the world. Right.
So I suppose a man who's been in charge of an office or something and has been known for being the boss for all this time suddenly comes home and he has another boss.
Well, I don't know that he has another boss, but, people of the boomer generation have hopefully worked out some kind of an egalitarian marriage. And, they know what their responsibilities are. Right. But I find that once the man retires, he kind of slips back into that 50s husband. And it's, the wife says, who is this man? So it is very difficult, and people really need to talk about it and talk about what their expectations are.
Make plans. Even as simple as planning the day, how things are going to be done, who's going to be around, who gets to use the car, and in these days of greenness, we only have one car, right? And of course, finances are the big question, and the big question in finances is how much do you need to retire?
I didn't even want to look into that because times are so different. In fact, I wrote the book 2.5 years ago, and I said things as crazy as, if you live in the Bay Area, you probably have a house that you can sell and buy 2 retirement homes. Yeah, right. So I didn't want to get caught in what happens with finances. Every other book is about finances. This is more about the psychological and emotional effect that retirement has on people and how this is a stressful change in their life. And people have to recognize that, and not just think, well, I'm working till Friday, Monday I'm waking up, I'm going to be retired, and it just doesn't happen that way.